If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button as well as the bell to be notified of future videos. Thank you.
Hello Internet, I'm excited today. We have 3 Special Forces members here with us. All 3 of them is holders of a Honoris Crux, which is a medal for valor. And they've agreed to come to the show and to answer some questions which the viewers have sent to us. But let me introduce them to you. I think we will start with our favorite Franz Curry. You all know him, he's been here, he spoke many hours. Frans, can you give me a brief background of yourself, and once you're done, I will introduce the rest of our guests.
Thank you very much, Koos. Firstly, I want to thank you and Rebecca for hosting this. You're doing a splendid job and you put in a lot of hours to edit and so on. So thank you very much. And then for this episode, I want to thank Douw Steyn and Jack Greeff, who is our co-guests. They are seasoned people and professionals. So I'm honored to be on the panel with them. Koos, briefly, the people that's watched some of my videos might know, but Koos, I was born in Pretoria, primary school in Pretoria, then went to secondary school in Tzaneen, agricultural school, matriculated in 74. With university exemption, I went to the University of the Free State for 3 years, studied law. I did not qualify as a lawyer, but later on I completed my degree. Then after university, I had to do my national service. I was called up to one side, and I was there for 2 days. The Parabats came along. They selected, did the selection. So I did my basic training in one parachute battalion, and then they selected a few of us to go to Oudtshoorn. So we were sent to Oudtshoorn to do junior leadership, which we did. And during that phase, I bumped on the border. I bumped into 32 Battalion. And at the end of the junior leadership training, I opted to go to 32 Battalion and instead of back to the parachute battalion. We also did a bit of a selection, and I was honored to be part of the first group that formed the first Recce group of 32 Battalion. That was interesting. We were trained and selected by people from the Recces, the Special Forces, and they gave us a very good orientation. Because then, whilst I was in 32 Battalion, the Recce group, we did some operations, and then they sent a few of us to do minor tactics with Special Forces, with the Recces. I was lucky to be one of them. Did the minor tactics there, and also deployed operationally with Special Forces during that period. They requested me if I would be interested in joining Special Forces, and very soon thereafter a selection took place. I went, did the selection, and I ended up at the end of 1980 to be part of Special Forces. Obviously, then you go to one Special Forces regiment, or one Recce as it was known that time, did all the basic training and all the courses, and qualified as a full operator, badged operator. We executed the operations, and then in 83, I went to the military academy in Saldanha, did a 3-year BMOL course, and after graduating in 85, I was transferred to 4 Special Forces Regiment, which is the sea maritime part of Special Forces. Because then in 94, I did my senior command and staff course, and after qualifying, I was promoted to a full colonel, and I was given the post as commander of one Special Forces regiment at that stage. Due to politics, it had a different name. It was 452 Parachute Regiment, but it's of academical value. Was then in September of 95, I was involved with a serious parachute accident, and then the next year I was transferred to the HQ, where I served as Senior Staff Officer Operations, as well as the Chief of Staff, which is the second in command of Special Forces. I served in that position for 2 years. And then I was drafted into a post SSO, Senior Staff Officer, Special Operations on the staff of Chief of the Defence Force, where you advise and do certain matters. And then in September 98, I left the military. So a bit long, but in short.
You mentioned different Special Forces units here. You spoke about 1 regiment, you spoke about 4 regiment. There might be people here who don't understand what we're talking about. So may I ask you, Colonel, can you just give us a short background on Special Forces, starting with Jan Breitenbach and his people, and then the different units?
Koos, most certainly so. Koos, all military organizations in the world have Special Forces. They all have pinnacle forces and strategic forces, so to speak. Just in short, we can relate to the SEALs of the Americans, and then the SAS and the SBS in Britain. The other countries have them as well, but I'm referring to them specifically. There was a very legendary person, Colonel Jan Breitenbach, who is the father of 32 Battalion and Special Forces. He was drafted into some training in the UK, and he also did the parachute training, initial parachute training with some others in the UK. And he soon realized that the South African Defence Force at that stage also needed a Special Forces which would be modeled on the Special Air Service of the UK. Colonel Breitenbach at that stage, I stand to be corrected, but was a captain, and he was involved directly with Chief of the Army at that stage. So when he came back to South Africa, he actually wrote a staff paper which he presented to Chief of the Army, recommending, that is in the late 60s, 68, 69, in that era. So it was very well received by Chief of the Army at that stage, who escalated that to Chief of the Defence Force. And to cut a long story short, Colonel Breitenbach then was given the permission to actually start a Special Forces for South Africa. He went about it very meticulously, recruiting people that would form the nucleus of Special Forces, and that commenced in the early 70s. And initially, then in 72, there was a core group formed, and they were stationed at the infantry school in Oudtshoorn. It was 11 people, but they called them the Dirty Dozen -1. But they are still all known as the Dirty Dozen. Of course, that escalated, and then between 72 and 78, they reported directly to Chief of the Defence Force at that stage. On the level of Defence Force, they had a Special Operations Group that conducted planning and gave orders to Jan Breitenbach, which would then plan and execute operations. Koos, then just in terms of the HQ of Special Forces, it's important, and I just wanted to mention that to people. On the staff of the HQ, it's obviously the CO, the commanding officer, which is a brigadier general, or a brigadier in those days. Nowadays, they call it the one-star general. And then on the staff, at the HQ, you have a SSO, which is a full colonel or a captain navy-wise, which is representative people by the all the arms of service. So you would have a senior staff officer, Navy, Air Force, medical, and yes. And then obviously all the intelligence services within the army is represented, and then all the staff functions, personnel, logistics, etc. So those staff officers then give their input, and they are the direct links to the arms of service if operations are planned. Was then the mandate of Special Forces is to execute strategic operations and to act as a force multiplier for the National Defence Force, or for the country. The Special Forces then actually consists of specially selected people, and there's a lot of criteria. I'm not going to go into that. Special selected people, special trained people to in the different aspects whereby they would then execute operations, and then specially equipped. So it's very important to select the correct people, to have the correct profiles, train them accordingly to, equip them accordingly to, and then they would execute special operations. And the strategic operations they execute is all in support of the national goals and aims in terms of the threat. Was then maybe just the units that is under Special Forces HQ. It's 1 Reconnaissance Regiment or Commando at that stage. Two Special Forces is the citizen force component of Special Forces, and then 3 was allocated to the Selous Scouts that came from Rhodesia, the then Rhodesia. It didn't take off completely. It existed for a very short while, and then it was a void within the hierarchy. Then 4 Special Forces in Langebaan. They are the maritime unit. 5 Special Forces in Phalaborwa is predominantly black, and a brilliant organization, and they execute a lot of operations, mostly landward. Then later on, 6 Reconnaissance Regiment was formed, and that was when Rhodesia collapsed, and the SAS from Rhodesia was integrated into Special Forces. They existed for a while under their own command, but also reporting to the officer commanding Special Forces. And after a while, that was disbanded, and a lot of the people integrated into either 1, 4, or 5 Reconnaissance. Of course, that's basically the organization and what it entails. Was then maybe just the questions that needs to be answered, which we have received the copies of. I just want to put that into perspective. The answers will be given, and for the viewers, just to bear in mind that Special Forces is a national strategical value or instrument in the hands of government, and the Defence Force, which assists in the national strategy of preemptive operations. What is preemptive operations? That is attacking the enemy or injuring or blowing them before they can actually injure you. And the strategy of South Africa was to do that externally. So rather take the war to your enemy in his own country, instead of waging a war in your own country and allowing them to come onto your geographical area, which is very clever because war is an ugly thing. It's destructive. It ruins the infrastructure, kills and maims a lot of people. Because then in terms of the preemptive operations within Special Forces, certain targets are identified as strategical targets in the countries of our adversaries, and target dossiers are actually built for all those targets. So should something happen, we draw out a target dossier for a specific country and then dust off, determine what the EEIs are, the essential elements of information that is outstanding, and then a reconnaissance would be launched. All the information would be given to such a stage that offensive operations could be planned. Of course, I'm going to suffice there, and thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Colonel Frans. I want to make two statements, and I'll keep it very brief. In the first place, Special Forces in South Africa anyway is a secretive unit, the most secretive in the world. They simply don't talk. So we are very honored for you people to tell us what happened 50 and 40 years ago, and we're grateful for that. Secondly, I want to say that the Special Forces were working behind enemy lines without permission from the host country. In other words, they were there as saboteurs and helping opposition groups, fighting communism mostly, and doing the things which soldiers do. Nothing they did was against international law or even the rules of war. I'm sure you will agree with me with that statement.
Yes, of course. I think one of the major things of Special Forces is, as an elite unit, is that we plan and execute operations in a very, very clinical way, and we adhere to the rules of war, and we do not trespass or go across those lines. Yes, in terms of the UN and so on, they would sometimes, develop a heartburn of certain things that was executed, but that's their problem. We always carried out operations that was authorized on the highest level at the state president's level, and with the authorization of the security group in politics, as well as then the chief of the Defence Force.
Yeah, thank you for that, because it's logical to anybody who listens here. If you start killing innocents, you're creating a bigger trouble, bigger problems in the future. And therefore, the South African Army and Defence Force, even to this very day, goes out of its way not to kill any innocents. That is just standard. It's part of our life. It's the way we look at war. Now, let us go now and ask our other guest, Jack Greeff. Let's ask him who he is.
Yes, Chris. Thanks for the opportunity to speak here and answer the questions. I was born in the Free State, where I'm currently residing, and so my English is not very good, because here in the Free State we speak only Afrikaans. But yeah, thanks, and to the listeners as well, and yourself for hosting this show. I think it's good. I joined the military when I was 16. As I turned 16, I signed up. So I was actually a child soldier at that time compared to today's standards. Did my training at the infantry school, and I received a trophy for the student with the best progress while I was still 16 on the instructor's course, which was a very tough course at that stage, a permanent force instructor's course. I was the youngest to ever complete that course. Then I served in 5 South African Infantry Battalion for 5 years as an infantry platoon sergeant. I did support weapons like Vickers, machine gun, mortars, and normal infantry platoon sergeant duties on the border. We took over from the police while I was serving in 5 SAI. Then I was transferred to the infantry school from 5 SAI, and while I was serving in the infantry school, I attended the Recce selection. The first one I did not pass. I failed some of the tests at the parachute battalion. Second one I passed, but the second one was actually tougher than the first one. Then I served in 1 Reconnaissance Commando for 11 years after I passed the selection. While in the reconnaissance, in 1 Reconnaissance Commando, it turned into a regiment while I was there. And I specialized in small team reconnaissance work, what was referred to as specialized reconnaissance, and also special techniques. When they posted me to the training school, I did the special technique section, which included sniper operations, mountaineering, photography, reconnaissance, urban operations, and stuff like that. Guerrilla warfare, a couple of specialized subjects that was presented in the unit. As a major, I went through the ranks up to warrant officer, class 2, and then became commissioned officer, resigned as a major, and then went to the Kruger National Park, where I joined their ranger team, section ranger team for 10 years, where I served as a ranger in the Kruger National Park. And after that, I spent my time private wildlife security operations up till May last year. I stopped. And so what I did, in fact, in my life is I combined my military skills with my conservation skills and presented rhino security operations, which I believe I was successful in. And so I could live out both my passions as a soldier and as a game ranger. I did that, and I can only thank God for that, and give God all the honor for allowing me to do those 2 fascinating careers, and to bring me safely through all those to where I am today. So yeah, that's it. I hope I can answer the questions that the guys want to know, as I will do so as best I can.
Thank you, Jack. That was fascinating. A remarkable career, any way we look at it. I wonder if we can get to Douw Steyn now, who I understand is the most senior of all of you. Douw, if you can hear me, can you tell me where you come from, your career in brief?
Yes, Koos, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Right. Koos, thank you very much for the initiative that you take to promote us. Thank you very much for Frans and for Jack. It's an honor for me to be with them on this show. And I think it is a very big privilege for me to be with them after all the many years. Frans, Jack, thank you very much. Yes, I was born in Ermelo in the Eastern Transvaal, and I went to school in Klerksdorp and finished matric there. Then I was called up as a national serviceman to Kroonstad, to the School of Engineers, where I also then qualified as a second lieutenant, and I started to specialize in military engineering. And that was in 74, 75, and 76. It's when the Savannah War started, and the School of Engineers and engineers thought that was good for me to participate in the Savannah War. And I did that with honors, and I enjoyed that time. I was let's call it a second lieutenant, and I was a troop commander, ensuring the mobility of my task force that I was in with. And I was also instrumental in the Bridge 14 episode and beyond that. And after that, when I came back to School of Engineers, I was head instructor, officers training at School of Engineers. And then that time, the reconnaissance commandos passed there, and I didn't know who and what they were. And they said to me, run here, do this, do that. And I did everything what they told me to do. So to cut the long story short, yes, then I qualified, or I came into selection, and I joined the selection, and I was one of the guys that did selection in Zululand, walking over the mountains all the time. But yes, then I qualified there, and then I qualified as a reconnaissance commando operator in 77. And then in 78, I had my first operations, and that was in Mozambique. And it was actually very frightening, because as a second lieutenant, just come out of Savannah War, and I thought, oh, this is great. I'm going to fight and do funny things. And I was with Lieutenant called Cocky de Kok. He's not the one of Kersler, he's the other guy. And within a week after we were deployed in Mozambique, he was killed next to me. So that was quite a story to get him out. But in any case, we came back, and the Mozambique/Rhodesian war finished for us. And I came back and I started to specialize in advanced demolitions in the reconnaissance regiments, where I also presented the very first, very in detail advanced demolition course in end of 78. And my students was the SAS and SAS and, the SAS of Rhodesia and the Zulu Scouts. That's the two groups that I had. And I trained them for about 9 weeks in advanced demolition, which included homemade explosives, which included lock picking, which included making of locks, making of keys, and so on. And we had a very commercial background as well that time on how to work with commercial explosives with AECI at that time, and with Vernon Joint. So yes, we did a lot of demolition training on that. And then in 79, I became the Bravo Group commander, whereas Jack was my instructor, and he assisted me very well, and we came a long way from that time. And that is also where we started doing special various operations. And in 79, 80, I think it's 79, the commander called me in and said, yes, we are now specialized. Recce and all the other operations is finished. And they earmarked our Bravo Group to go and do a specialized operation in Angola. So that is the start was of Amazon, the destroying of various targets in Lobito. And after that, I was transferred, and we did the operation. It was very successful, and that is where the seaborne capability really started. And as we always say, that is where the generals of the South African Defence Force realized, but the Navy is not only there to sail around in peaceful times, but also in operational times, because it must be remembered, all the generals and guys that time was of the infantry, panzer, or armored corps or things like that. They didn't understand the Navy. They didn't understand that there can be a capability at sea as well. So we proved them wrong on Operation Amazon, and that's where the seaborne operations actually started, and there was the people started to have the confidence in strategical operations on the seaward side. And I was then transferred from 1 Recce to 4 Recce, and I stayed there until 92. And from 92, I did all the operations and stuff that time. And from 92 to 94, I was at headquarters. And from there, I went to 73 Brigade as Chief of Staff, and 76 I left. Thank you.
Thank you to all you gentlemen. I think I can safely say we have more than half a century of Special Forces backgrounds and operational experience were with us. Now, there was quite a few questions which were asked by the viewers of this show. And we got hold of these gentlemen, and I'm going to put the questions to them now, and they can answer us. So I think we will start with the first question, which is directed at Douw. It comes from a man called Maringo. It's obviously false names, but that doesn't matter. What he's saying here is, I understand that Douw was in command of Ops Kersler on the land side, and Admiral Söderlund was in command of the sea side. Now, what did go through your mind? What went through your mind when things started to go wrong? And afterwards, how did you deal with the losses? Now, perhaps, if I may ask, though, if you can just give us a brief background on what Kersler was, because there might be people here who don't know about Kersler. And I believe all three of you gentlemen were at Kersler.
Koos, can you hear me? Okay, yes, Koos, thank you very much. The gentleman asked, I think, a very good question, because if you look into the past, there was a lot of people always talking about Kersler, Operation Kersler and Operation, and what the people did and how it started off. Operation Kersler was a very big strategical operation, and the confidence was in us to do that type of operation, as I said before, after Operation Amazon. I was not the commander, as the gentleman said. I will just give him the quick background on the command and control of a seaborne operation. The first guy that you get, or the chief of the General Officer Commanding Special Forces, he's the main operational commander. Then you'll get a guy, SSO, Senior Staff Officer from the Navy, and specifically on Kersler's side, it was a guy called Woody Whitburn. He was an operation commander, meaning in terms of the Navy and the moving of the ships, and he reported to the general. And then you get two other commanders. The one was then you get the various ships that was involved, the vessels, 2 strike crafts and a Protea ship, the hydrographic ship. And then you get the Barracudas. The Barracudas is a ship, or the ski boats, that took us from the strike crafts to the landing site. And there was Colonel Kinghorn in charge of the boat, raiding of the boats. Then you get the mission commander, that was Colonel Bestby, that time a commandant. And then you get the raiding group commander, and that was myself. And in the raiding group, we had 5 teams, which Jack and Frans was respectively one of them. Jack was team 1, and Frans was, I think, team 3. That had different targets on Operation Kersler. And that's how we executed in terms of the command and control of the operation. Just to give you a little bit of background on the command and control, where you take for Colonel Besby was on land as well. He was on the high ground to ensure good communication back to the seaward side, talking to me, and then I was talking to my teams that was deployed in the various areas of the target. So when you asked me how did I feel, I was given the task to evaluate this thing after the joint strategical committees, as Frans explained before, decided this is a good target to be, because due to the fact that they are supplying the oil, diesel and petrol to the enemy, to the fire, and we decided, yes, we can do that operation. So we planned it, and I looked at it and I said, yes, we can go. And that time I was still in 1 Reconnaissance Regiment. And it must be understand that that time for Recce was still very small, and they were just actually boat commanders and divers. They didn't have really raiding groups as 1 Recce, and that's why the task was given to 1 Recce to do the raiding group, and that's why I was the commander of that specific group. And we looked at the group and we said, yes, we can do this operation. It doesn't, it can't be a problem. There was two really significant decisions to make. The first, we couldn't get all the information that we wanted to get on the target, because that time there was no Google, there was no nothing. And there was very old maps and very old newspaper clips that we took. And we look at that and we try to put that together to see what was the target like and to see what was going on. So the position of the target was not a problem. That we identified and we could look at that. But the detail of the target, we didn't have. And there was then 2 things we said. If we look at the target and we don't know what is going on, first, we must have a reconnaissance done, a physical reconnaissance of the contents of the target. How does it look around the target, and what is the inside of the target look? And the second one, it goes about our seaboard capability, that we will never compromise our seaboard capability. That was the 2 big decisions to make. So first, the decision to make in terms of the seaborne capability, that was done. And just to give you a quick background on what we started at 1 Recce training. We did a lot of training there, and I emphasized and I trained specifically on techniques. To place a bomb is the minor thing of this whole operation. It goes around the alternative, about the emergency, about the escape and evasion plans, the medical plans. That is what we concentrated on, and that's what I focused on in the duration of that training. The first phase of the training was in Durban itself, on the bluff. And our second phase was we went down back to Fort Doppies in the Caprivi, where we did a little 2 or 3 weeks of training, specifically looking at escape and evasion, how we survived, and what we can do, and the fitness and the kit, is it correct for escape and evasion. And then the first phase of the training was when we got back, we then flew down to Langebaan, where we interfaced with the seaborne capabilities of 4 Recce, the Barracuda boats, as well as the strike crafts, and also the Protea. So once that everything was done, the teams was done, we trained extensively to do this whole operation without communication, as far as possible. On this has happened, we just go according to time. And there was one word that used for a code, and that was Bravo. And yes, we trained, if one team is do have a problem, and this team will be responsible for one team will be responsible for the other. So we integrated the team such that every team was responsible for another team. And so was all the guys in the teams responsible for each other, meaning that Jack will know exactly where his two guys that in his team, where's his medical kit, where's his bombs, where's his that, where's his that. So that is if there's a problem, everybody knows exactly what to do. No chaos, just go over to plan B, plan C, or plan D. And that's how we trained, and we trained very hard, concentrated on fitness and concentrate on timings. Timings in any special forces operation or any, I always call it a special forces operation, but a sabotage operation. This is purely sabotage. We went in there not to go and scratch the paint of the tanks. We went there to sabotage the strategical target of that specific country, and that's what we did. And we did it on various other targets as well. So that is, in short, what we did, and that is how we planned the operation. And when the operation went wrong or went difficult in terms of explosions that took place and bombs that went premature, we didn't panic. There were no panic because we trained it. It was just plan B. And we just carried on with plan B, then plan C, and everybody came out, and we realized that Cocky wasn't there. We realized that Kloppis and Piet Faiki, we took them out of the area. And again, it was Frans and his team that Jack went in to go and fetch them. It's not that I gave a command on a radio, hardloop here, hardloop there, do this. No chaos, no panic, just go over to plan so-and-so, and the guy just carried on. And that is because of dedication, hard work, and good training. And that is how we executed in very short that specific operation. We came out, and we then went alternative route back to the sea as well, get on board, and the two guys that got hurt went on to two different ships, different medical aids, different places, and from there they went to the Protea ship, and from there they went back to Walvis Bay, and we carry on. We can in length talk about Operation Kersler in another meeting. We can go into more detail, but that was just the background and the feeling we did. And I must say, I was never, I won't say not scared. I was scared all the time. I'm still scared to die. I can't even jump with my eyes open. But it was a good training session. The confidence that our whole team had in good preparation, in good planning, in good belief in each other, and in good believing in our training we did, that was the success of any operations from there on forward, and also including Operation Amazon that was done previously. On all our special, specific operations, training, confidence, and the lack of confidence was there never ever, because we believed in each other. Thanks, Koos.
May I ask if Jack or Frans wants to say something to what Douw has just said? Because I know both of you were there as well.
Now they must say something.
If I may, Koos, I think Jack should commence, because Douw referred to the information that was lacking, and that had to be confirmed. And Jack and Sam Fourie was the small team that was deployed prior to the execution of the raid to gather the information, and I think that was key and very essential, and played a critical role to the success of the operation. So, Jack, over to you, sir.
Yeah, just looking back at the questions, I agree with Douw. The many hours of rehearsals at night and all the training printed, each team member's silhouette was imprinted in your mind over that training period. So when we went into the operation and things started going wrong, when Kloppis arrived or appeared out of the dark, I recognized him by means of his equipment and the shape, his shape. and that you can only achieve if you train at night with your equipment that you are going to use on a continuous basis until you each team member's silhouette, if you want to call it that, is imprinted in your mind. Obviously the reconnaissance was an important part to get the routes, to determine the routes to the target, and the final elements of information that was outstanding still to confirm that. So the reconnaissance basically went in, we had a look at the target, got the information that was needed, but very important, as Douw said, is the timings, which we had to adhere to, so that we walked that route to and from the target a couple of times at night to make sure that we know the route and that how long it will take to cover that distance to the target. And you will remember when things went wrong, when we took the casualties out, we went straight through the enemy base. We didn't go around it as was planned. We went straight through. The loss of the of Koki was to all of us was a shock. But Douw correctly says we have trained for each possibility, for each eventuality. We have trained for that. We had a plan for each thing that could have gone wrong, and the whole thing just actually went off very, very smooth. When the bank started going off, everybody was very calm, went about their thing, got together, extracted the wounded, and got back to the ships. If people started panicking, it would have been a disaster. We would have also been left behind there. So yeah, Douw is right. The training and the planning was meticulous, and I think that saved us all from a lot of bigger problems that could have popped up.
Chris, I can just add to Jack, if I may, and as what is important there is what Jack said. You know, every team had his own target, every team had his own priority. Now, Jack specific, with his reconnaissance, he also did a specific reconnaissance on the towers of the refinery itself to determine where's the main column, where's the columns that must be destroyed to destroy the target. So Jack was team number one, and he had to infiltrate the deepest into the refinery, whereas Frans, Koki, and then went to the big tanks and small tanks, and then Gert and Keros, they went to the gas big tanks to destroy them. Everything, there was one word said in this whole operation, and that was the word by Jack. When he was on his target, he gave the command Bravo on the radio, meaning that everybody now can start operating on their tanks and placing their bombs as was trained and what they have to do. And that is when the chaos started, when Koki's tanks started to explode, where Frans and his guys, teams, laid quite a significant amount of mines. I think he had 12 tanks to cover, or 18 smaller tanks, where Koki had the big ones to cover. But yes, it started on one word, and it was the word Bravo, where we all started. And there was the three teams or the four teams inside the refinery with the small tanks, big tanks, and the gas. Then there was another smaller team at the entrance of the refinery to ensure specifically this what happened, that if there's a problem, they ensure the exit of this whole operation, to ensure the safety of the people, and to ensure that the guys that exit goes through the same place where they came in, and they will give the recovery up. And then where I was a little bit further on, the same story. I had more heavy weapons and radios and stuff like that to talk. but it was planned that we will move back in phases under the control of teams that were assisted in the training that we did. So yes, we from there, Jack and them took leading again, and they leaded us out back to the shore, and where we got the Barracudas. The strike crafts actually came close by, where they dropped us off and where they picked us up was very different due to the emergency. They came very close to the shore to pick us up, to make the whole distance and everything shorter for us to move out of the area. And I must say that the medical staff on the on the strike craft of both strike crafts was very well equipped. They actually, in part of the timing procedures of this whole operation, we started off on the ship where the officers based of that specific strike craft will be changed into an operation room, in a medical operation room, where they could do operations, where they can put on drips, this and that. So there was 2 medical operation, let's call it theaters, on both ships. And from there, they had the first line of medical treatment. And from there, they moved over to the hydrophilic ship, that's a Protea. And there they had a total big operation room with a medical team that operated on them, fixed them up in such a way that they could survive until they got right through from Walvis Bay to one military hospital in Joburg. So the medical team was excellent, and they were very professional in what they did. And that's part of the survival of the 2 guys that came out.
Yeah, question for me. Yeah, I think Douw and Jack has covered most of that. If I may, in terms of my observation, and I was a team leader, maybe to, I don't want to say summarize, but I think there's a few points that critically stands out, which I would like, in my point of view, want to put forward. One, as Douw and Jack said, the detailed training and the attention to detail in terms of planning the operation with a very detailed target analysis and where to place charges, etc., is critical. We had a Sergeant Major Warrant Officer from the Air Force called Piet Coetzee, who was a master photographic interpreter as well as a model builder. Now, Sergeant Major Piet Coetzee built a detailed model of Kersler, of the target, and on that model, we based and rehearsed our actions and whatever we did. Point 1. Point 2 is the selection and training of Special Forces people. If you do not go through that absolute strict regime of selection and training, and you build up a trust in one another, that you know it's not necessary to look over your left or right shoulder. You know that your buddy will be there. As Douw and Jack said, there's no need for a woo-ha. We've rehearsed plan A, plan B, plan C, and we just execute. So the trust in your fellow operators is always there. So then the third thing is the cool and the collectiveness of our commanders, starting from Jack through Douw, through Commandant Bestbier, through the whole line. You know, if people start panicking, it's chaos. So, I mean, just relax, keep calm, do what you've been told to do, and execute it. And I think within Special Forces, that is one of the things we are trained through and through and through. I think the fourth point I want to lift out is the way Douw and Jack explained it. It's very simple. It sounds like a walk in the park. But I want to lift it out to say that the tenacity and the guts which Jack and Sam had to execute the reconnaissance to determine the landing spots, the infiltration and exfiltration routes, and you know, the outstanding essential elements of information that was missing, gathering that, bringing that back, lying up over day where Cubans nearly urinated on Jack and Sam, and they remained concealed and wasn't compromised. Now, of course, that is it's something to note. So don't let them make it off that it was just nothing. Then you know, at the stage we had to crawl across. It's like a soccer field. All of us, the whole team, the whole group. It was about 300 meters. Now, the flare from the conning tower, we had to walk towards that. Now, that is totally blinding you. That was one of my personal big things that disturbed me. You know, the thing blinds you and you have to walk and... But in any case, so Jack took the lead in crawling across that open space. Now, at the stage, you look back and then you look with the light. Now, if you look against the light, it's difficult. If you look with the light, I mean, it's clear. It's like looking at the movie. So you know, if there was guards that was really alert and that was scanning that area, we might have had a challenge. And make no mistake, if a big oil farm explodes and ignites, it's not a braai fire. That I can assure you. So to have moved around and you know, trying to find Pitfaiki that was lost and Kokkie, it's not a braai fire. You know, it's a serious thing. So, you know, I really think that the calmness, the planning, the camaraderie, the way our leaders led us and taught us is key. And that was always, and it always remains, part of Special Forces operations. Thank you, Koos.
Well, I just want to, I'm talking now too much. I know that. I want to go home now at 4. Is that Jack, when they came back from their reconnaissance, they had a lot of information and a lot of photos taken. So we went to the Protea ship, and there was their ops room. We closed it up and we made it our dark room, and that is where Jack, Sam developed their photos inside that ship. That time it was still in mik and druk cameras. So yes, they took that information, they developed the photos, they put it on a board, and we did our planning, confirmed the planning we did, or change the route or change this or change that with the information you give. But it's just to show you the primitive way we still work during that time of reconnaissance, where Jack came back with his little camera, developed the photos in a dark room on a ship that was never done before. He took everything on the ship and all the thing was done there. And just get one step back. It must be remembered, we all talk about we're Special Forces, we're Special Forces. Yes, we were. And the reason why we were, there were no doctrines, there were no SOPs, there were no nothing. Whatever we did was the first time. Whatever we did, we trained. And just to give an example, after every training session, we will go back into the classroom and write lessons learned. That is how we started to write our documents. That's how we started to write our training manuals, by lessons learned on training sessions, on operations and whatever. There was no books, there was no nothing. We was not exposed to the international world of soldiering. We had our own soldiers, we had our own doctrines written by ourselves, by our experience, and by our dedication. We wrote manuals that became the best in the world in terms of sabotage and strategic operations, just because of writing lessons learned and how we operated. Just Frans talking about they were leopard calling over the soccer field. What he didn't tell you, that time there's a lot of light shining and everybody think they're on a stage because of all the light shining. But that specific moment, all the lights went off. Everybody took cover and said, yes, what the hell is going on? Because all the lights went off. What we didn't realize that is that lights that works on heat. It's a certain heat, they will go off and they will go on as if there's still lights today working that way. So that was not in our appreciation. The appreciation was to take cover. But that is what just a chemical thing that happened on that specific moment of everybody leopard crawling. Thanks, Chris.
Jack, it seems like you want to say something, but before you start, I know the viewers are going to ask me what happened to the urinating incident. So if you can just briefly tell us, and what happened to Sam Fourie, who were with you? I know that not with this operation, but later in life.
Yeah, for that operation, I selected him as a buddy because of his experience, and we've been working together for a long time already on smaller reconnaissance work. The area where we had to infiltrate there was a big Cuban enemy base. Then there was a smaller Cuban radar installation. Then there was a anti-aircraft position on our route. So we had to work our way through all those enemy positions and find a route for the raiding party through all those enemy positions. So we can do that in time as well. So what happened the first morning, we lay up right next to the big base, which was filled with a lot of vehicles, including T-55 tanks, which I have never seen. So I was quite excited to look at this T-55 tanks. So we took up a hide, what we call a hide, right next to the base. There was some cover from bush and a small tree. And I said to Sam, he must rest because we worked the whole night. We've been busy the whole night, so we were a bit tired. Told him to lie down and take a rest. I will get into the tree and observe a bit and see where we are and take in the surroundings. And while we were doing that, two Cubans moved closer, arrived, and while I was sitting in the tree, and they started picking fruit from the bush and talking around the bush, picking fruits. And the one opened his fly and urinated on Sam on his feet. and I was sitting in the tree, and all they had to do was look up, and they would see me because there was no cover in the tree. So I sat still, dead still, like a chameleon, and waited for Sam to fire the shots with his silenced weapon. If he did fire, I mean, that would have been like sticking a stick in a hornet's nest. It would have compromised the whole operation and would have been serious, really serious trouble. So he kept cool, and I kept cool, and luckily, it looks like the Cubans had to meet somebody, and that guy was getting restless and pressing his hooter, the hooter of his vehicle, and those two guys started running. So we then immediately vacated that position. Luckily, to an alternative hide, and we've been gone for about half an hour when some policemen arrived there. But what we didn't realize was that there was a toilet. It was a public toilet, so it looks like, you know, everybody that wanted to relieve himself went into that bush, and we actually smelled it when we moved in. We smelled the feces and the urine there, and we didn't put two together. We were too excited about all these tanks and things next to us that we nearly made a mistake there. But yeah, that's it.
Well, I just want to say to the viewer here, this happened behind enemy lines without any air support, which I know about, far behind enemy lines. Can you tell me, Jack, what happened to Sam Fourie, who were your buddy on this mission? What happened to him later in life?
Sam joined the Kruger National Park as a ranger like I did, but after him. So he went there before me. And he was walking on a Sunday afternoon, was walking with a friend and observing a herd of elephant, a breeding herd of elephant, when a bull elephant in must was getting excited to get to the herd, and he was between the bull and the breeding herd. So the bull attacked him, and he was killed by the bull elephant on that day. So yeah, that's how he ended his life.
You know, we talked about the Navy, we talked about the medical and so on. I just want to include the Air Force as well. The Air Force during that time had a C-130 as a Telstar on standby to Telstar, meaning as a guy that listened to their radios and to see if there's any communications, emergency, specifically if the escape and evasion took place. Yes, that was in the air, as well as the little Wasp helicopter on the Protea. That was the assistance from the Air Force side. And it sounds a little, but that is critical positions in this whole operation in terms of escape and evasion and in terms of communication throughout the system if we have to use it. So yeah, we used all the forces on that specific operation. And we can go into length in more detail of the operation in terms of how we got there, how we traveled, how did we play volleyball, and all those things on the Protea. The ship turned around because a ball was lost. So we had some fun as well while traveling there. And then we went over to do the operation.
Yes, we had the honor to speak to Admiral Söderlund. And he told me that you people had some problems on the mess of a wardroom of a Protea. You were not dressed properly or something.
Yeah, especially on the Protea, it was very formal officers because, you know, they were not the war type of officers. They were very gentlemen, and they were every night they must dress according to this and to that. And we didn't have that type of clothes. We was not even shaved. We was nothing. And they had a hell of a fight with us every night, every time when we as officers want to go and eat something. And then down the line, we decided, listen, if you don't want to give us food, just bring it outside. We'll eat it outside on the deck on a discus, and we did. So we carried on. But yeah, the how you call them, the matrosa, they were not happy about breaking their rules, breaking their ships, and breaking this, that, and the other, because they're very, very selective officers.
Though this question is for you. The next one, we moved on a little bit now. Admiral Söderlund, he wrote a book with your Iron Fist from the Sea. And he told us that you won the Honoris Crux at Bridge 14. Now, Bridge 14 is one of those battles during Op Savannah, which became very, very famous. In fact, we had a gunner on the show, youngster, guy was, I think, 18 years old, national serviceman. He told his story about Bridge 14, was in artillery, shooting all the time. But I know you were there as well. I wonder if you can tell us this briefly what happened at Breach 14, because that's where you won your decoration.
Yeah, of course, I never knew that there was something like Honoris Crux or medals or this or that or the other. As you said, I was a national serviceman, second lieutenant, ensuring the mobility of the task force. And that's what I did. I did a lot of explosive works. I ensured that the flanks of the task force was covered with blowing up breaches, blowing up roads, blowing up airports, just to ensure the mobility and there's no attacks from the flanks. When we got to Breach 14, I was doing my thing there as well, carrying and shooting and doing. But after the breach was built, I was the first guy that went over, ensuring again the mobility of the task force. So I went over and I had a section with me, traveling on the road past Breach 14. And and I came to a crossing, but I could see in the road there's something wrong in the road. I stopped my vehicle and I said to my section, you stay behind, I just want to go and look what's going on there. As I went there, they started to shoot me with this 127 millimeter rockets, what you call BRTMs, and they shot us and they shoot me from all over the show. What I then didn't know, that was a registered artillery target, a registered target for that 127, we call it a rooi oog. They were shooting us. But in the road, there was mines planted. So I decided, but I must take out this mine and ensure that the road is safe for the rest of the force to come. So as I take them out, then I will get a radio message that say, take cover, the rooi oog kom. They're coming and then they fall all over, luckily not on me. So they were shooting, I was around about busy for half an hour to 45 minutes, taking out about 37 to 32 landmines with all these things firing around me. And I put the mines on the side of the road. And yes, then I went back and that was in quick what I did. Many years, not many years, after that I went on to a permanent force officers course. And the officer commanding of that course called me in, myself, De Wet and Wessels, there's two of my friends. And they said, well, we must report to Pretoria for a medal parade because we're going to get the Honoris Crux. We didn't know what it was and we thought we were now in big trouble because there's some other thing happened to us. And yes, then we went off to this huge parade and we got this Honoris Cruxes. And I can with very honest say my two friends, both of them got the Honoris Crux gold. And I just got the normal one, the rusted one. And yes, that is where I got my Honoris Crux from. So it was that time already that I was 19 years old.
Okay, this question is directed to all three gentlemen. And the question is, do you think with a raid like Kersler and the attack on Luanda Harbour, which took place, I think, a bit later, be possible today with all the satellites tracking ships?
Of course, if I may start, I think, yes, it can happen. Because the type of, now I want to say, if I move backwards and we still use the strike craft and we still use the Daphne class submarine, it was very, very difficult to find them and to get them even on satellite on how we try to protect it ourselves. Yes, and the way we did that is, by disguising the ships as fishermen boats and stuff like that. So yes, I think it would have been a little bit more difficult on a Navy side to do that. But yes, on the Daphne class side, I can just give you a small experience what happened with me, and that's why I can tell you it happened, is that we did a reconnaissance of ANC base in Luanda, just outside Luanda, and the teams was dropped, and we was in the submarine, and we went actually into the harbor with the submarine, and then there was a Russian ship detected something, and we went out of the harbor, and the Russian ship came behind us, and we actually dived into a hole outside the harbor of around about 300 feet. And we switched off everything, and we could hear the frigate or whatever the Russian ship may be came over us, ting, 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 looking for us, because I suspected something happened. And that is not what I want to tell you, is that the Daphne class submarine, it's a very silent little submarine, very uncomfortable. It made us uncomfortable, but very difficult to detect, especially in deeper waters, and with the Russians that time that already had a lot of technology in the ships in terms of looking for ships, looking for that and looking for that. Yes, it could, I think it can be done, but I don't know how successful it was be. But there's a few generals that said, if you take the Buddha, we can do funny things.
Jack, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with Douw. It can be done. The secret weapon is man. It's the mind of man. It's not the weapons they're using. It's the man that uses the weapon. That's a secret weapon. So yeah, with today, any satellite needs a starting point. He needs to know what he's looking for and where. So if the ships use the deception measures that are available to them to get there, they can get there undetected. We can use submarines to get us there, or a submarine to get the team there. The question is whether the South African Navy has got the ability to do it now. I don't think they have. But if we go back and with the things we had, I'm sure we can make a plan to get there. The reconnaissance would be a little bit easier because we will now have Google, that we can use Google Earth, Google Maps that we can use. So that would get us most of the information that we needed. But I think you will still need 2 men on the ground to go and check the route, make sure what's happening and what is the chances of success to get this raiding party to the target. So I think things will not change much. The operation will be very much the same than what it was, but we'll just have to be a lot more clever than what we were then. And I think we are, if they use the experience that we have gained. So yeah, I think it's possible.
Thank you. Frans, do you have anything to say? I know you're a staff officer as well. You passed the course. Perhaps Douw did as well as Jack. I don't know. But would you be able to plan this today?
Of course, yes. What Jack and Douw said, I agree completely. I think the South Africans have the ability and the capability to plan and figure out anything around anything. So the Boere will make a plan, and you must not get fixated on the problem. The problem is there. It's a challenge to omzeil. What's omzeil? To circumvent.
Overcome the problem.
Yeah, the Boere will overcome the problem. I mean, go and read what Patton and Montgomery and all those said about the South Africans in the Second World War. So I don't want to carry on and belabor the point. My opinion, yes, the nature of war changes continuously, but so does the intellect of us to circumvent that.
Gentlemen, thank you for that. And now I have a question to you. And I have to say, just as background, I know that Recce is the maritime unit. It's the one which do the seaborne operations. And I've heard some of the Special Forces members call them the Greeff. What's that? Crayfish Special Forces. Now, I think that's where the next question comes from. What would be the culture in Recce? Is it totally different from 1 and 5? And anybody can start answering me with things he can answer that. Frans, you were grinning there in the background. Perhaps you should tell them what you think of this.
Yeah, Chris, I might get a lot of flack from my fellow Special Forces colleagues. But to my opinion, Special Forces is the pinnacle of all Special Forces units. Why? You have to qualify as a ground Special Forces operator, which you can be allocated to 1 or 5 or whatever. Before I carry on, I am not talking derogatively towards 5 or 1. They are specialized in their own way, and they have all their specialized directions which they specialize in. So not derogatively talking about them, but okay. For Special Forces, you can only go there and become a specialized Recce operator if you've done the basic course of going to any of the units. Now, of course, just to, if you want to, I want to say, to reach the pinnacle of a Special Forces operator, you should do all the maritime courses, do attack diving 1 and attack diving 2. Now, I've just done a summation of if you do all the courses, and I'm briefly going to run through them: water orientation, basic swim, surface swimming, reconnaissance swimming, operational coxswain, seaborne operations, attack diving 1, attack diving 2, and then underwater demolitions. So if you do all that training, in terms of the duration of the courses, it's 16 months. So it's a year and 4 months. Additional training to what you would normally do in another unit. Of course, if you specialize in another unit, it's sniping, it's small teams, it's whatever. But I think, you know, you cover the dimensions of land, sea, and air. And if you look at the SEAL, what does SEAL stands for? Of the Americans, it's sea, air, and land. So, you know, then you cover everything. Although everybody in the normal cycle, you do water orientation and certain courses with Recce. So that's just my personal opinion, and my ribs are open for any blows to come to my side. But we are not better. Or if you served in Recce, you are not necessarily superior to the other operators. No, you are not. You just have additional training, and that is the point I want to make. So you're not superior to them. You just have additional training, and that's it. Greeff Recce, and I think Douw Steyn is one of the main culprits stealing crayfish. But as I've said, he was my commander, and I learned from him. So, you know, Greeff Recce, it's just a, you know, a thing. Yes, we had the privilege of doing sea survival and, you know, being in an area where you could, you know, enjoy the whatever was available in the sea, from abalone to crayfish or whatever. But the common name of being a Greeff Recce suits us well. I want to just quickly relate one story. Gerry Heidenrich He was the RSM of Fourie Recce as well at the stage, and some of his cronies. They, in the NCO's mess, they wanted to have a braai and a crayfish and whatever. But it was a full moon cycle, so it's leap tide, high, low, and high. So they went crayfishing, and they stacked their stash, which they dived close to the jetty on the Donkergat side, and they had it in a net, but they sank it, and they knew where it was. So this one morning when we went over with the ferry, I think it was still Tilly Smith was the RSM. So as we were coming in and going alongside the jetty, there was this yellow bag sticking out from the rock somewhere. And he said, I don't know, we detailed, staff, go and have a look at, what bag is there? And when I went there, it was this bag full of crayfish. Harry Heinrich and say Mary Mason, so they built up their stash. So I think over time, Fourie Recce got that name of the Greeff Recces. But it's all in good spirit. And I think the three units always work together very, very well. So there's no animosity between them and so on. Jack, Douw, your comments.
Yeah, Frans, it is the Fourie Recce guys was just something different. We actually started the real culture of Fourie Recce started when they were very small, and that started at Salisbury Island, where Samuel Botha, Gavin Christie, and that guys was, and Gert Kilder really established the unit. And from there, they moved to Langebaan in Cape Town, where we expanded the operation, we expanded the base, and that is where seaborne operations really started. But the guys that I mentioned, they were the culture of Fourie Recce. And they started Fourie Recce, and they kept on with that specific culture. And it was different to other units. It's not that the other units don't have culture, but this was something on another level of culture, if I can name that, because going to Fourie Recce is not a joke. The water is cold. You're always working in night times. You dive at night times. You work at night times. Whereas 5 Recce, the Bos Recces, they work in the bush again. Long hours, hard hours, and they were just as difficult as anyone else. And also the guys of 1 Recce, where Jack was specific on the training side. Jack trained people for 16 hours at a time. But yeah, Fourie Recce was something different, and everybody wanted to, not always wanted to go to Fourie Recce in terms of doing a seaborne operation, because it was not always that pleasant. It was not a difficult type of story, but yes, everybody enjoyed it, especially when the crayfish and abalone and that stuff came out. And then everything that was cold and wet and this, enjoyed with a beer and a little bit of abalone, crayfish, arikrekel and that type of stuff. Yes, we enjoyed that. And Gavin Christie, that's also passed away, he was one of the instrumental guys in making seafood. He could make seafood. He even had a restaurant in Langebaan, and he was the seafood king, operating all our dishes and things that we made. Gavin was always there. Thanks.
Yes, Chris. I agree. I think all three the units, 4 Recce, 5 Recce, and 1 Recce, had their own culture. The 4 Recce culture was, as Douw said, I did not want to go there for the simple reason the water is too cold. If they established 4 Recce at Salisbury Island, I would have considered joining 4 Recce, but the water is too cold, and I don't like going into cold, dirty water with a wetsuit. That's not my scene. So, but at the same time, one recce had their own culture, which you could train. There was a lot of specialized courses that you could do at one recce, which takes similar time than the four recce specialized courses. So, I think at the end, the guy, when he finishes his basic cycle, and he then now must decide where he's going, is the same person. They go 3 different ways, and they start specializing. And when you start specializing, you lose some of your original not skills, but culture. So, for instance, it will be difficult for a four recce, fully qualified four recce guy to suddenly be pulled out and dumped into the bush with a group of 5 recce operators for 2-3 months. They don't like it as much as I don't like the water. They don't like all that stumbling in the bush. So, and the same with the one recce guy. I mean, you take him out of his environment and dump him with the 4 recce guys. It's not nice. It's cold, and you can see on their faces on the photos that was taken during exercises and training. The one recce guys are unhappy on that boat. The 4 recce guys are smiling. But you take that same 4 recce guy and you put him in the bush with a 5 recce team for a couple of weeks. Then he's the unhappy guy, and the 5 recce guys are the happy ones. And in one recce, we had an airborne culture, very much airborne. So there was a lot of parachuting, urban operations, sniping, reconnaissance, climbing, and that kind of stuff that again shaped the culture of that operator. So the one recce guys were basically, I think, the most flexible of the lot, because they had a little bit of everything. They could go either way to go and operate, and which is why 4 recce used 1 recce a lot in the beginning, especially. Thanks.
Well, it's fascinating to me, and it's a good thing, I suppose, that every one of the units have its own culture, but they can all work together as well. That's great. Now let me go to the next question. This is directed at Jack Greeff. I'm not sure who sent it to us. It's specifically about Operation Col Douw. So I think you will have to tell us briefly what Col Douw is. And then comes the question, was there ever a discussion to abort this mission once the element of surprise was taken away? Was there an overconfidence that it would be an easy operation? Jack?
Yes, Operation Col Douw was the commanders in the high echelons sat around a table and decided that the recces must now do something. They're sitting around doing nothing, and they decided that the recces should carry out an attack on a SWAPO, what they thought was a SWAPO headquarters, and eliminate this headquarters. A similar attack was done a year or two previously, very successful in Zambia, where the recces jumped in by parachute and wiped out the whole base in an early morning attack, first light attack. So the lot sat together and decided they want the recces to do a similar attack on a place called what they referred to as Eheki, which they thought was the headquarters of SWAPO in that specific area. So they got all the recce units together, which at that stage, and that was all the operators from 1 reconnaissance, 2 reconnaissance, which is the national service or the reserve unit, and then 4 recce and 5 recce. They all got together and 4 doppies and started training to attack this base. The total of operators, I think, was 104 total. So that was black, white, 4 recce, 1 recce, or the whole lot was 104. The plan was to jump in by parachute at night, and then move from the drop zone move on foot in a certain direction until we hit a vehicle path track that goes into the camp. We will then follow that vehicle track in a formation called a hollow square, which is, some call it a box formation, open box formation. If you close the box, it's a square. If you open it, it's a hollow square. The front part of the formation going into the attack first, and then you have two flanks on either side. And then in the center, we would have a mortar group. I think it was 3 60mm mortars, commando mortars, which will give fire support. So that was the plan. We rehearsed the plan to the point, very, very in detail. The guys were heavily laden with ammunition. The whole force had 31 light machine guns in the force. Every second guy had a light machine gun with at least 600 rounds of ammunition. So it was a very heavily armed attack force, and the whole attack was planned to take place first light, early morning, when those guys are still in their, what we call bashers, their sleeping places. We would have attacked them. Everything went well. The training went very well, and then the planning started unraveling. Not going to go into much detail here. But suddenly we were called in and said, okay, the operation was on, off, and one day we were still working at Doppies doing maintenance work the whole day. Late afternoon, they said to us, get in the aircraft. The DACs are coming to pick you up. You're jumping in tonight. The operation is a go. So 2 C-160 aircraft was tasked to pick us up at Mapacha Air Base. He got on the aircraft there, rigged, fitted parachutes, and the first accident happened. The guy's rifle was loaded, and he shot the dispatcher through the leg, through the knee. So that was this. Well, before that, one of the Dakota engines cut out, so we nearly did a bloody emergency landing with the Dakota. So things started going wrong from the beginning, and we jumped in that night. Around about midnight, jumped in. The jump went very well. The training jumps helped a lot. So the grouping was very quickly. So the bottom C-160 was the white guys mainly, and the top C-160 consisted of black operators, and they landed amongst the white guys. So we could quickly get them together, and we grouped very quick. We started moving. And by first light, we realized that we've been dropped at the wrong place. And we kept walking the whole day. Our water ran out. It was hot. It was October, so the Angolan bush is dry, very hot. And by the end of the day, there was some firing from the base, and we could determine the position of the base. So we turned the formation and went in the direction of the base. So before we got to the base, the command element, Henny Blow, and the team leaders got together and discussed the situation. We've lost the surprise element, and we were not exactly sure where we were, and things did not look very well, and the guys were tired and the water was finished. So they discussed the issue of pulling back and then attacking the next day. But 3-2 Battalion was just south of the base. They've been attacked the whole day, and they have made some attacks on the southern camps. And so the whole area was a beehive of activity, and there was just no ways that we could pull back and lie still. It was 100, I think it was 80, 90 operators that were there on the ground. There's no ways we could hide ourselves and lie up and still attack the next morning. So yeah, we did. The question, I think, was there ever discussion to abort the mission? Yes, we wanted to abort the mission for that day and attack the next morning. And then the order came from the top that we have to attack or leave the operation. And then the specifically one team leader, Sergeant Major F.C. van Zyl, very respected person, very senior in the unit, said, to any blow, Major, let's go and get this done, get it over with. And we decided to attack that late afternoon, which was a disaster. And we lost seven operators dead, of which Sergeant Major F.C. van Zyl was one, and eight operators wounded. And yeah, we drove the enemy out of the base, but there was a lot of other things that also went wrong. So that's in short Operation Crop, Dave. And yes, we did consider cancelling, the attack, postpone it for the next morning, which would have also been problematic. But the decision was made to attack. That attack should never have happened, but it did. And that's sort of things that happens in war, which we can't really avoid. I think I've answered the question.
Yes, I am hoping on the channel that we will one day make a IEEKI special where we speak to everybody so we can see what lessons were learned and if there's anything good which came from it. It's one of those sad days in South African Special Forces, very, very sad day. And then the same person asked the following question for Jack. Can you briefly tell us about your experiences in Rhodesia during small teams under Chris Schulenburg? Now, Chris Schulenburg is one of those famous people. You can tell us about that, and then we wish to go over to your book, because I know you wrote a very good book, and we have to introduce the audience to it as well.
Yes, just want to correct the question. We never worked under Schulenburg, Chris Schulenburg in Rhodesia. What happened is Special Forces identified the need for the small team capability, and they sent Andre Didericks or Didis to Rhodesia, who linked up with Chris Schulenburg to get information, first-hand information on how this kind of operations are done safely. And that's how the thing developed. So we never worked under him. We also didn't work with him there. He carried over the knowledge. At one stage, he came to South Africa to oversee one of the first operations. Didi did. And so, yeah, we basically learned from him the basics of small team operations, of operating in two-man teams. And we took it from there. And like we did with the other operations, when we worked with the SAS in Rhodesia, operation, what was it, Bootlace and that kind of operations, where we worked in the what's called the Russian front in Mozambique. That's where we really learned special operations. We had casualties. We learned how to use radios. We learned how to use our medical skills. We learned how to anti-track, and that we learned from the Rhodesians at that stage, because we were new to the game. And I'm glad to say, and I'm proud to say, that in all those aspects, we have bypassed them. We have done operations which they tried or attempted. They couldn't finish. We finished that. I'm talking here specifically about Beira and other operations which they just couldn't complete. We went in after they disturbed the hornet's nest, and we carried out effective operations. So thanks for what they've taught us. But I think we did a lot of things better and improved on what we learned from them.
I have to make a confession to all the viewers here. We've reached page 1 of 6 pages of questions. And I'm quite sure there's going to be a lot of questions on what we did today. but it is virtually impossible for us to do all the questions at one go. So I want to switch direction now, and I want to speak about Jack's book, which I know is a very, very good book, highly rated and recommended. Jack, can you tell us about the book you wrote a few years ago?
Yeah, I'm not a guy that likes to talk about myself, but a lot of the operators pressurized me and said, look, why don't you write? Why don't you write? Because you've been in Operation Savannah, you've been in the Angolan War, you've been done most of these strategic operations in the Recces, and why don't you write something? It was actually Mr. Nick Steele, who's the late Mr. Nick Steele from KwaZulu-Natal Department of Natural Resources. He really encouraged me. So I decided to put pen to paper, and I think I completed it in 2 years. Every morning early I wrote. And all it is just a chronological sequence of my military career. Since I started as 16-year-old and until the day I left as a major. I've got a picture here, or it's called a Greater Share of Honor. And it covers all the strategic operations, including Kersler, Amazon, which was the first one, Kersler, and then the one where we attacked the Beira fuel installation, which was called Operation Katishu, where I did the reconnaissance and led the raiding parties in, similar to what Kersler was done, and we destroyed those targets, and then all smaller operations which I've done while in the military. So yeah, the book is available. It's not there's not a lot of them, millions of them, but it can be bought on the lulu.com. It can be found there, hard copy for the overseas viewers, and then Bush War Books in South Africa that sells the book. And every now and then I get a few royalty copies, and I might have some.
Jack, thank you for that information. I'm going to put all the links in the description below for your book. And I wish to thank everybody who was listening here today. If you have questions, you're welcome to put it here below. You're welcome to contact me. If there's enough interest in this episode, I'm quite sure I can twist some arms and perhaps send a bottle of good red wine or something to the participants so that they can come back on the show for us. And until we meet again, God bless.